everybody. I'm Chris.
I'm Adrian.
And I'm Jimmy.
And welcome to WorldView Finder, episode 23.
23.
All right.
We're here.
The Michael Jordan episode.
This is our year, or our episode.
This is it.
That's Michael Jordan's jersey. Do you guys, are you Michael Jordan fans?
Is that the guy from the meme?
Oh my gosh.
So the guy from Space
He's the
Jam.
greatest, basketball player of all time.
That's debatable.
And a mediocre baseball player.
Okay, what are we talking about today?
Today, oh man. Well, I've got to revisit You're Still Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah because I left out a huge worldview thing in it.
All right.
Incredible.
We're talking about some Star Wars a little bit. A little Mermaid.
Temptation.
We're talking about temptation because Jimmy's been tempted. And why returning library books may be a bad thing.
Be detrimental to your health.
Steal your library books, kids. And we have time. Hamster and Gretel, maybe? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what. It's action packed today. So,
Here we go.
All right. So last week I talked about You're Still Not. Oh wait, was it 2 weeks? No, last week.
Yeah.
You're Still Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, the new Netflix Adam Sandler movie, and we were talking about the worldview of it. I completely forgot about this part until after. I was like, I want to bring that up. So there's a really great moment where they're in the classroom and the rabbi lady is like just talking to the kids or whatever about their good deed project. And well, then this girl just interrupts and like, hey, if God is good, then why is there climate change and the world's falling apart? And this other kid's like, yeah, why do I get zits? And they're like, and then I mean, some are deeper questions, but it's basically like, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people or whatever? And so, which is a great worldview question because a lot of times the way people answer that question determines how really they view God. And if they view God as this like being that's all powerful but yet doesn't stop bad things from happening, then like they start to see him as evil.
Yeah. Why does God allow suffering if he is good?
Yeah.
Or then they go to the conclusion that God can't exist then.
Oh yeah. Because if he was good, then
so it's a huge like what your view is on suffering.
Yeah. And so the rabbi,
it's
who's
huge.
supposed to be the wise one of the group, she pulls out her guitar and sings because she sings great songs. But her song is God is random. That's what she concludes. And so like all these kids are singing it in the classroom. They're like, oh yeah, God is random. Like, so she doesn't really even address pain or something. It's just like, well, God's random. So he just does things that we don't know. And again, there's the verse that talks about God's ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts above our thoughts. And so there are going to be things about God that we aren't able to fully
And
grasp.
like the rain falls on the good and the evil.
Yeah. We aren't able to grasp or understand, and there's going to be good things that happen to bad people. That should be the question.
Yeah, that's more my question.
Why do good things happen?
Yeah.
Because, and so when she addressed it in that way, I was like, oh, she missed a great opportunity. But I think it might get deeper into like maybe Adam Sandler's view of the world of like how it's just, and that's where it almost becomes like, okay, is this really a religion that they believe in, or is it just like, well, we do this because it's tradition and things like that? And so,
let's answer the question for her. Is God knowable, first of all? And how would you answer that question?
The problem of suffering.
There are books written, studies over thousands of years.
You're hearing it here first. No.
The true answer right here.
Yeah, and I would say it is, there's evil in the world because of sin. And so the reason bad things happen is because of sin and the world's in a fallen state. And so could God stop it and end all suffering? Yeah, he's going to. Like he tells us like, hey, there is going to be an end to pain and suffering. There is going to be a time where we're with him in his presence forever, where there is no more pain and no more suffering and no more tears and all that stuff. And so, but we are now in a fallen world and there is pain and suffering, and that's because of our own doing. And well, what about hurricanes? So is bad weather a result of sin? I mean,
all creation is under the curse of sin.
Yeah, so it's all broken and all that stuff. And so does God allow bad things to happen? No, because he doesn't tempt us, which we're going to get into. God, he can't be tempted by evil, and he doesn't tempt us to do evil. But there are trials and things that we go through that he uses actually for his glory to help us actually know him better. And so when bad things do happen, we've got to look for, okay, how is God working in this despite the sin and the awfulness of the broken world? Like, how is God using that brokenness to teach me in those moments. And so
when you say God is knowable, what do you mean?
that you can know him.
That there's a relationship there.
Yes.
Okay, so
it's not a like I'm just gonna do things in hopes that God will recognize me. There's a back and forth relationship.
Okay, so I'm thinking when it comes to why these bad things happen. I thought you meant when you said God was knowable that you would know why these things happen, or why God doesn't intervene.
I think sometimes you can in your own life. Those things become clear. It may not be for years and years of like why these things allowed to happen to you, or it'll become clear after you die and you get to ask him those questions or something. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. That is a tough one, because it's like, in theory, God could intervene and stop certain things. So why doesn't he?
And I think he does at times, and we may not know it.
Sure.
Randy Alcorn wrote a great book called Heaven. But no, he wrote a book, was it Deadline, the first one? And I remember in that book, like, it was an interesting take, because you kind of got, like, it's a fiction book, but like you kind of like got to see things from a heavenly perspective, and talked about like a time where he, like, they were like he was in heaven looking back at his life or whatever, this guy. Yeah. And so there was a moment where they're like driving down the highway, and they were supposed to get off on this exit, but like a kid was asleep in the back, and then he just woke up and was like screaming. He had this like pain in his side, and so like the parents got distracted and missed their turn, and then like had to go way down the road and turn back and all this stuff, and and then his side was fine. And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, what was that about? He's like, well, here's what would have happened had that not have happened. And they like pulled off and got hit by a oncoming car or something. Like a car was going the wrong way on the. And so you're like, oh, there are these things that maybe we don't always know why those things happen in that moment. And again, it's a fiction book, but he writes, like Randy Alcorn writes a lot about heaven, like in a nonfiction book.
Right. And I think it's important to like understand and know these truths to prepare, or like to train yourself. Because I think everyone is going to have those moments, those seasons where you can have all the knowledge in the world of Bible verses and, your faith and what you think. But then once it happens to you and you go through periods of suffering, then those seasons are really, really hard. And a lot of people, I think, lose their faith or go through deconstruction or whatever during those times. So it's important to like set yourself up and of like, okay, I know these things are going to happen probably to me in my life sometime. Yeah. So I need to get a community that will back me up, like all these sorts of things. So because we all are going to face some sort of trials and suffering in our life. It's
like the Mike Tyson quote, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Exactly.
That's
a great quote.
But here's another good quote. Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And I think a lot of times that verse is taken completely out of context. Yeah. It's like, hey.
But also, that's like the stereotypical verse that's used for suffering. And that makes me want to punch people in the mouth.
Exactly. Well, so I mean, I think that goes to the practical side of it, because I think you have the theoretical. Well, yes, we believe that God uses all things to the good of those who love him. But on the practical side, either when something tragic happens to someone else, or even happens to you, how do you practically respond to that? Yeah. Like, well, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, don't do that. And I think, because for those of you listening, I think a lot of times, especially students, will have those questions, because that'll be like, well, why does God allow babies to die? Or I prayed for grandma and she still died, so why doesn't God love me and stuff? And so, but it's like, if you played out like, okay, if everything you prayed for happened, like, there wouldn't be anybody that died. and so, or some people.
Well, there's a really good book by, his name is Peter Kreeft, Kreeft, called Making Sense of Suffering. And his kind of argument throughout the book or perspective is that it takes away our free will. And if God started intervening in everything and not allowing anything bad to happen, then it ultimately, like, if you pare it all the way down, we're back to being like robots with no choice.
Yeah, because that's one of the other questions. Like, okay, well then why did he put the tree in the garden to give? But it's about choice. Like, you have a choice to do something or not do something. And a lot of times, our suffering is caused by either our own choices or other people's choices. Now, there's natural disasters and things like that. But I mean, just normal everyday stuff. And you're like, well, yeah, we don't want those things to happen. And I think in some ways, to me, suffering points to God, because it's like there is something better, and he created us to be like, we know that this isn't right. We know that when we suffer, like, something is off and something is wrong and something is broken, and then we have a God that's like, yes, it is broken, and I'm trying to use us to help fix that in the world. And so like the way that we live and the way that we answer those questions, like, we're just like, well, God's random. Like, I don't want to have a relationship with a random God that may just out of nowhere be like, today Chris's ear is going to fall off. Like, no.
Your finger gets chopped off.
Your
Stay tuned.
Gets chopped off. Oh, man.
That's a really good segue that we'll come back to. But no, I
we'll bring that one back up.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that
Well, I had something and now I lost it with my own stupid segue.
Oh, no.
We're talking about how suffering kind of points to God.
Oh, yes, because, well, God, being God, could have chosen any way to redeem the world. Yet he chose the suffering of his own son to be that and to do that. So you've got to think, like, why would God have done that? And I think there is a part of it. It's not, God isn't random, but he is a mystery. And I think there is a mystery in suffering that we can't necessarily answer. But the fact that God chose to suffer with us says a lot about him.
And I think God's playing the long game too. And like you were saying, and I'm sure you've had things in your life where
the eternal game.
God's eternal game.
But you have things in your life where something seems bad, but then going forward, you're like, oh, actually that was really good for me. And then fast forward, and because there's so many moving parts with all of the universe, it's like God sees the top-down big picture, and we see the minuscule. So it's hard to, without his big picture perspective, to see, well, why do you make that decision? But he sees how it all affects everything.
And that's where faith and trust come in. Is you have to, what you believe about God is really important during those times. Is he trustworthy? Is he faithful? Those big questions come up.
That's true.
Well, okay, this actually segues great into Heart of Stone, which I was going to say for next episode, but I think we need to get
do it
because Heart of Stone. So it's a new Netflix movie starring Gal Gadot, and so I think
That's
the
a
reason
fun name.
people will be interested in it is because, one, it's PG-13 action movie, so
Love those.
Somewhat safe. It's done by some of the same people that did Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, I think, or one. I don't know.
I like
Whenever
that
they
one.
say that, they're like, by the same minds behind you, like, what? I don't
There's
know.
probably
but,
like one
yeah.
person that worked on it.
but,
Yeah, exactly.
but in it, the gaffer did
Yeah.
both. But so the whole premise is that there's this machine, the heart, that's like a computer program that's analyzing everything. Like it would be listening right now as we record this. It's like all your phone conversations, texts, internet searches, all that stuff, and it's compiling all that data.
Doesn't that already exist?
It's already happening.
Yeah, but
That's a real thing.
But it's doing all that to give probabilities of, like, okay, this is the probability that this is going to happen, and so there's a team of them that are trying to stop certain things from happening, like terrorist attacks, things like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but the free will part of it is Stone, that's her last name, I don't know her first name. Gal Gadot. So her character in this is like works for this group, the Heart Group or whatever, and so they're trying to, like, stop certain things from happening because, like, these world events of people trying to take over or get nuclear stuff. I don't know, all that stuff. So, but there's moments where she's like, I want to do it this way and go after this guy, and they're like, no, because the probability of that working out is like 3%, and this way it's going to be 90%. And so it's that free will, like, okay, I don't want a computer program telling me like I have this much probability. Like I want to be able to make my own choices, but they're very strict on like, no, you got to stick with this plan and do it this way. And that's kind of the tension throughout the movie, because there's a girl that's trying to steal the heart and take it over for herself so she can have control and all this stuff. So, but it was that idea of like, okay, what's the human aspect of it versus are we just computer programs running our sequences and things like that?
Well, some people think so.
That
That's
makes
the
me
other
think of
thing.
Minority Report,
Yeah.
which is a very old movie with Tom Cruise.
Never heard of it.
The precogs. Oh man, Minority Report. I liked that movie.
I feel like it was a little bit revolutionary in the sense that it's like this already, where like analyzes people's actions or.
In Person of Interest. Did you see that show?
Oh, I watched some of that.
Okay.
But then it's like you catch the person before they commit the crime.
Oh.
So then it's just talking about it's the same question of like, would they actually have done it? You don't know, but this computer like brought out the detail. What is like spits out the results and is like, this person is going to commit a murder tomorrow.
Let's
and
put
then
them in jail.
They arrest them before it happens.
There you go.
Yeah.
There was a 56% chance. Let's kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and so on this one though, I think a lot of times it's people that have already committed crimes that they're
Sure.
trying to like
Yeah.
get something back from or rescue something or figure something out. But Person of Interest, it kind of reminded me of that. I don't know if you ever seen
You've talked about it. a little.
starring Jim
Just-
Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion.
Oh, nice.
But he like, I loved that show. But Person of Interest was that it was like this computer program that this guy made that analyzed all the stuff. It was after post 9/11 to like figure out, okay, is there going to be another terrorist attack? But it would print out like all these social security numbers, and they were just interested in the terrorist ones and not these other ones. And so he would take that list and be like, okay, we got a number. What's going to happen to this person? They never knew. They knew something was going to happen, but they didn't know if that person was the victim or the perpetrator of the crime. And so kind of each...
Which could be a dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, so they
This
go,
person is either going to get murdered or murder someone.
Well, they would go observe and be like, okay, this person's doing this. It seems like they're bad, but then like, oh wait, but now they might be good. Like,
Yeah.
so
what's the worldview for the Heart of Stone?
How does it connect?
yeah. So well, the heart, because it's that idea of like our humanity, right? Like even though this computer program is telling me that all these things are going to happen this way, well, there's still the human aspect. There's still that free will that we have as people to like make a different choice, or maybe we were gonna get angry and murder that person, but we calmed down beforehand.
Wow.
Maybe we didn't pick up that guy at Taco Bell. So
Too soon.
Yeah.
so it was that idea of like we have a choice, even though everything else in society is telling us this is what you're going to do, or that kind of thing. That we
Right.
still have our free will, and yeah, and in that, in it, like some of the people that were kind of behind the scenes, like, oh, you're going to do this and this, they like realize, like, oh, okay, maybe not need to stick so strictly to these numbers, but like just like here's an option and all that stuff. And so, but I don't know how it ties to suffering, but it ties to like the free will aspect of what you were kind of talking about and all that stuff. And
Yeah,
so,
because that's kind of the cause of a lot of suffering is because there's free will.
yeah.
And at least that's what people think. Is there free will? We'll talk about that next time. I mean, probably not, but it's a bigger
Yeah,
conversation.
because I didn't realize we were going to get this deep with.
Well, let's just
with the problem of
attack.
suffering.
And is free will actually real?
So,
Oh my. Okay.
Speaking of free will, let's talk about
Free will.
returning library books.
on your own free will. Okay, it's time for Florida Foibles.
This is a doozy.
All right, this one it was a little squeamish. So, lady was taking back library books, as you do, just returning library books. But she did something that she shouldn't have done. She put her hand down into the book drop for some reason. I don't know why.
Maybe she was like trying to push the books down to make sure that when you close it, it doesn't, like, your book doesn't sit on the top.
Well, whatever thing, she put her hand probably too far down, and her finger got chopped off.
Wow.
Yeah, so
But there's already too many questions. Like, she put her hand too far down the library return chute. It's not like she put her hand too far down some
Garbage
complex
disposal.
machinery. Like,
Yeah, it's the book drop.
why would you ever think that there'd be some peril at the bottom of a book drop?
Despite having returned books in the same manner numerous times before, Haverly, that's the lady's name, reported feeling a rush of pain while pulling her left hand out of the box. What she at first assumed was just uncomfortable hand placement soon became clear as a severed middle finger detached just below the fingernail. So
Just below the fingernail. Okay, so that's
So-
still a good amount.
Yeah, but still, it's like the tip of your finger. But it got all the way cut off, like completely severed.
yeah, because in the book drop they're like, oh, well, somebody's finger is in.
Yeah, book.
So no,
book,
they were able to
finger.
retrieve the little piece from the book drop. It was not able to be reattached, unfortunately.
Oh.
But she's a registered nurse, but was in shock, like didn't know what to do. She's like, I'm just like,
bleeding out of your finger.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but now the library placed a sign. Please do not place your hand inside this book drop. Like,
Just
You-
slide your books in.
you think, or they might need to like just get a different mechanism to do that. I
Yeah,
don't know.
there are other ways. Like at our library, you just slide it on a little conveyor belt, and it.
That's only at one of the libraries.
That's true.
I know, and it's great.
See, this is why I just listen to audiobooks. I don't have this problem.
Or
So, but then, so here's what her lawyer said. She didn't do anything wrong other than return her books to her peril. Bum, bum,
Why
bum.
did why do you say it like that? Like the only thing she did
It's
wrong
not
was
like
return her
somebody
books.
was like, "No, we're arguing that she deserves it because her books were late.
Hey,
Yeah.
after
we're not
a
going to
week,
charge late fees. We're going to charge your fingers."
I bet you won't return a late library book again.
I
That'll
don't
show
even know
her.
that they were late.
I know,
But I bet they were.
They probably were.
Yeah,
She deserved it.
but that's crazy.
Now, what, so here's the thing going forward. They're like, oh, I see you lost a finger. What happened? Like,
You should make up a story.
library book drop incident.
The
You're like,
library guillotine.
Jeez.
that's like the worst.
Yeah, I feel like she should be able to sue the library for like $18 million now.
Yeah.
Because if you can get burnt by a chicken nugget and sue them for like $600 million, then
Yeah, if
if you lose a finger,
just returning a book,
Yeah.
you could get a lot of money for that.
Yeah, and she didn't do anything wrong except return her book.
that's
To
true.
her peril.
To her peril.
I hope they said it just like that.
Yeah, he like pauses, then looks back at the
It's
camera.
like 100% a TV show, like
To
a
her
Perry
peril.
Mason.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
This lady did nothing. Yeah, the library's like, no, she put her hand down in the but yeah,
They didn't have a
What
sign.
is down there? That's my biggest mystery. What is down there to cut a
It's
finger
an
off?
animal.
Well, I mean, because you've seen the way that they're designed is though that you can't reach down and get other books out
Yeah.
because you can't go in and steal library books. You
So
just
there's like
go in
a,
and check them out
yeah,
for free.
crossover thing.
So there's like a little, at least in ours, it's like a little swoop.
Yeah.
And so you put them in there and then dump them off the swoop, and then that part closes up. So I guess if she had like
You
put her
should
hand
have
down
hand
and
down
then
there.
it's like the part that touches the top,
Yeah.
I could. I mean,
It's strong enough to cut your finger off. That's crazy.
It's industrial grade.
Yeah.
and it was
It's military
No
grade.
joke. They do
and
not
there's
want you
barbed
stealing
wire on it,
books.
so they can't reach down
Yeah.
there and steal books.
That's actually what they used in the Vietnam War. They just opened up a free
Torture
library, and then as they returned their
Stick your
library
hand
books,
in here.
Oh man,
it cut off their hand.
Well, they're trying to stop people from being tempted to steal.
Ooh, speaking of tempted.
Ooh, speaking of temptation,
That
we got some themes at our household this weekend. We watched Force Awakens.
Star Wars.
Star
Yeah.
Wars.
With our son, who's 5. Don't question my choices. We thought that one was
They did
safe.
start with the original trilogy, so don't be mad.
Oh
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
started
yeah,
with
yeah.
Force
We're not
Awakens.
going to
They-
start with Force Awakens.
Yeah, they started with the original trilogy. So
He
we're not questioning your
wanted.
parents.
So that's the thing is he was so obsessed with the original trilogy that he wanted to watch more, and we were like, I think the only one that's safe, like for a 5-year-old, is Force Awakens. But it was like the first one that introduced like blood
Oh,
on the screen, but
Oh.
he wasn't like he didn't know.
he's traumatized now.
Hey,
You won't realize until he's like 20.
He
there's
wasn't.
blood, but not as much blood as that lady returning her library book.
Yeah. Right. He's seen blood before. No, so it's fine. No, actually it was fine. It was good. But the thing he picked up on the most though of this one, like the other ones to him, like episode 4, 5, and 6, It's just like the pure fun adventure of it.
Yeah.
But Force Awakens, he was very curious about the dark side, and not in a fascinated way, but in a
Good.
like, no, like
I would like to go to this dark side.
he is tempted.
Come to the dark side.
He did. You know what? I was so proud because he said, I like Kylo Ren. He's pretty cool. And he said, but he's not as cool as Darth Vader. I was like, yes, I've taught you well.
Oh, God.
But so no, he kept asking about Kylo. He was saying like, is he being tempted right now? Because like, especially when he faces off Han Solo and they're having that conversation, or even when he's like fighting Rey and they're like, there's lots of conversation and with Rey as well, when Kylo's trying to kind of tempt her, he really picked up on that. So that was his main question. The whole movie was like, is she being tempted now? Is he being tempted now? You know, we had to kind of like walk through those each time of like, well, this is what he's asking her to do.
Yeah.
And she is trying to make the choice whether this is right or wrong. So that was just an interesting thing that he pulled out of it. But then we watched the new Little Mermaid, since it's out on Disney Plus, the real
real Little Mermaid.
life
Real one.
one.
They got real life mermaids. From
So
that
we
show.
didn't finish it, so I don't feel the ability to like talk about the whole thing. But again, the temptation aspect was there because
You did not finish it because it was terrible.
Oh,
You
right.
haven't
We
had
just
time.
we just ran out of time for the day. So yeah. So in this one, the other, like, I think the old one is like, she goes to Ursula and Ursula's like, here, sign this. And she's like, okay. And then she just like gives her voice away and all this stuff. And it's really like a quick transaction. And while they had to try to make it quick again, Ursula was like twisting the king's words, making her argument like, well, if he is so, like,
Good and loving.
well, bigoted against humans, like, whatever, that like what he says about humans is lies, right? And she's like, yeah, because he thinks all humans are savages, and I've been observing them, and they're not. They're like really nice people. There are some that are really nice. And she was like, well, then if he says that about humans, then what has he said about me that could be wrong? And she was like, well, he's said that you're a witch and that you like use your magic powers for evil and stuff. And she's like, well, this person wanted like these things and I gave it to them, and this person wanted this. But she doesn't see like, or ignores the like nasty little sea creatures that have all been turned, but there's like skulls on the ground and stuff. So it's like,
Don't worry about those.
clearly ominous. Yeah. But it's very much more like twisting. And so she ends up actually saying no, like, I'm not
Oh,
gonna
spoiler alert.
and do this. Yeah. And so she's leaving, and then Ursula like says one thing of like, okay, well then that's your choice to remain and she like kind of all of Ariel's fears about herself, she like just says like, that's your choice then is to be this way for the rest of your life.
Oh.
And so then Ariel like turns back around, and it really is like Ursula kind of pulls her in and makes her do it. So she's never really fully like, I'm 100% on board.
Like the first one.
Like, yeah. But once it happens to her, this is where I think it gets interesting. Because once it happens to her, she's very excited that she has legs. She gets to experience the
She's
human
got
world.
legs.
Because that's...
Must be nice.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Yeah, well, she's been envisioning
Wait.
her whole life what it's like to not have legs.
And now that she does,
has them.
so great.
Wait, can I say a little aside? Now, anytime my kids complain, my wife will go, well, at least you got legs.
At least you have legs, children.
That is a reference to one of our episodes
Episode 21, maybe?
where we just make fun of Jimmy for having legs.
That's
Yeah,
true.
It was great.
It's a 30
Great
minute
episode.
mark. Let's go
Yeah,
watch
right around there. You can see on the retention graph, people go and watch just that part.
it, 'cause
3
it's the
minutes of greatness.
No, episode 20, sorry. the
Episode
happiness
20.
Episode
equation.
20. Okay.
Go back and watch.
Anyway, so then all these good things happen to her. Like, it ends up working out. So that is what I wanted to talk about today, is like, she was tempted. She gave in to temptation in her own way because she did have to like actually sign and sing, you know, and she ended up doing that. Yeah, which Amos and Ari both have been just nonstop singing that, just those lines. But so it's like, okay, she fell into temptation, but it was to Ursula's peril at the end.
Oh,
Like she made the wrong choice, I guess.
You picked the wrong mermaid to tempt, Ursula.
Right. And then it ends up working out fine for Ariel. So
that's the takeaway.
That is a weird balance to me.
So when I give the gospel, I talk about sin always separates. Like there's never going to be a time where you sin, where you give in to temptation, that's going to bring you closer in relationship to God or to other people. Like your relationship with Jesus isn't going to grow deeper because you sin, and your relationship with others is not going, like that. Sin is the brokenness. And so what we talked about earlier in this episode, like that wrongdoing is never going to draw you closer into relationship with anything. And so except the devil, you're growing closer to him.
Nice.
And so I mean, there were consequences. So the original Little Mermaid, this is where I have trouble because like when I watched it as a kid, I'm like, oh, this is fun or whatever. Dinglehopper. Okay, but
Scuttle is played by Aquafina, which is hilarious. I will say.
So getting into, because in the old one, that was the thing. Like it was like everything works out for her, even though she like disobeyed her dad, like did everything wrong.
Everybody came to her side and her viewpoint.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, but you still disobeyed the king. So
right.
So that's where I've struggled with Little Mermaid because she's also 16.
Yeah.
You're like, you can't even drive yet. You
can't even guide a whale through the
there
water
you go.
at this age.
You can ride a Sea-Doo.
Well, so that's a lot of like Bible stories too, though. It's like David did all these terrible things, but then the overall kind of God's look on him is he's a man after God's own heart.
Right, but there were still definite consequences
for
totally. His sin. And so in this one, like that's where it's like there's not really a consequence.
That's true.
Right. It seems like I wish I would have finished it, but the way it's definitely going is that there is this between like Prince Eric, whatever. They know mermaids exist, and they think that they're causing all their shipwrecks when it's really just like bad storms and terrible rocks and stuff under the waves. So they have like this prejudice against mermaids, and then her dad has a prejudice against humans, because they killed her mom. Like that's you. I don't know if that was a backstory in the original, but
Disney.
You kind of
one of the parents.
One of the parents is dead. It's the mom at the hands of humans. So he thinks that all humans are like murderous killers as well.
Sure.
So there is some sort of like Ariel and Eric are definitely gonna be working towards reconciliation between humans and mermaids. So that's where it does come in of like maybe they're showing her heart as not being just like a rebellious teenager. It's more like
the first one it was, yeah.
Right. Her heart is more like there are these people that are really fascinating and can be beautiful and contribute to some things that we don't have. And Eric is on the surface saying that about them. And it's like, so to me, it is a little bit more of the story of
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet, or like, I guess maybe David, where it's like she's making some really bad choices and having some bad consequences and not honoring her father and all that kind of stuff. But they make him seem a little bit worse than just worried about her as well.
So, but in it, because he's mad at her, right? Because he finds out that she has legs.
The dad. Well, I haven't gotten that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess
right now she's
maybe you should have watched the whole thing.
I know.
But yeah, so maybe there are some consequences, and because in the first one, like, yeah, he's obviously mad at her, and they have to figure out how to move forward in their relationship because she deliberately disobeyed. That's Lion King. But yeah, and so how did your son like process the temptation part? Like, you said he picked up on that?
A little bit, but not. I mean, not as much. He was just more fascinated about Ursula because he likes her being creepy.
Ew. Creepiness.
And she's pretty creepy in the movie. But
Does she still have octopus legs?
well, yeah, that's
Okay,
like
okay.
That's her
that's
thing.
her biggest
her-
trademark.
It's her thing.
That's her thing.
She does.
But no, she's funny too, of course.
Did you watch Little Mermaid?
I think I've watched it. It's been a long time, and I don't know
The
if I
original?
watched the entire thing.
But not the new one.
Not the new one. I've
Okay.
not.
To do 'em.
Yeah.
But
So the question is with
Yeah.
that, like, what do you do with temptation? How?
yeah, or I even want to say like, what should Ariel have done? Like, what would have been the better choice?
Well, and I think the thing too is with a lot of things, it's the hard part about temptation is you're only tempted by things that you actually want. So it's not like, oh, that these people are forcing me to do evil. It's like there's something in there. There's something in her deal
Yeah.
that she wanted, and
Yeah.
that's the reason that she was going to be going through with it. Is because, and with anything that we're tempted by, the reason we're tempted by it is because in our sin nature, there's something there that we want, even if we don't want to admit it.
That reminds me of James. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their
Ooh.
own evil desire and enticed. That's what you were saying. That, like it's our
Look at
own.
that. It's in the Bible.
Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death.
Oof.
It's James chapter 1.
Yeah. So, and I think that's why the Bible says it's like you have to die to yourself daily. So it's like there are going to be things that you want, and even on like a smaller scale, it's like even if things aren't sinful, we have, I think, short-term desires and then long-term desires too. And I think it's Craig Rochelle that says discipline is trading what you want now for what you want most. So it's like there are things that I want right now, but they are going to interfere with what I want most.
Yeah.
So, continuing in James, it says, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So, when I was thinking, like, okay, what should Ariel have done? Like, because if she didn't grow legs, then, if she didn't grow legs, then she wouldn't have, none of this would have happened. That seems like the catalyst to the solution.
Yeah.
So what else could have been that? And I mean, it's like, let's analyze the Little Mermaid.
Let's do it.
But is it like she should have gone to the surface while Eric was looking for her and started talking with him and
Yeah.
making negotiations for human mermaid relations? I don't know. Like, and remained a mermaid or something.
See, that's where, like, because regardless of even doing that, would still be disobeying her father.
Yeah.
father.
And so
Yeah.
that's where it's tough, because if somebody is wrong and there's something that you like, okay, this is wrong. But yeah, but I think the temptation part was, well, I'm going to go not just like prove like, hey, he's a nice guy or whatever. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to go
Yeah.
full legs.
Full legs.
Yeah.
Go find this guy, which
Well, that's the other hard part, especially if you know you are under your parents. It's like, what if you think doing this is the right thing to do and your parents say otherwise? You just tell them to flip off, or what do you do?
honor your father and mother.
What if they're wrong?
Oof.
This is tough. I mean,
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
tough.
like this. That's what I'm saying. Is like this is the question of the Little Mermaid. It's like,
It's true.
what if your parents are wrong?
What if they hate humans and you don't think humans are bad?
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to just conversations of like helping them to understand where you're coming from and you starting to see where they're coming from. Like, well, Ariel, your mother's dead because of the humans, and so I
But
don't
they
like that.
they have that conversation. He says that, and then she comes back and says, "Well, I have witnessed humans," and then he just like completely loses it, and
Yeah.
he's like, "I can't believe you went to the surface." All
Yeah.
this stuff.
Well, because when emotions are involved, really, it's like a lot of times you can't logically come to a conclusion that makes sense. It's like there's so much hurt and so much pain from this thing that happened that he's not going to see it any other way.
Right.
And that's where I think the conversation part is important, because I know sometimes growing up, I've known people that like their parents are just like, no, you can't watch this, and they're like, well, why? Like, well,
I said so.
Yeah,
Right.
I have a bad feeling about it, or have like, you're just like, well, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, what's this bad feeling? Now, again, there are prompts from the Holy Spirit and things like that, but it's like at the same time, it's like, well, I need a little more concrete evidence of like, here's something specific in this or whatever that you can't do that. And so that's why, like, I think kids and parents need to have conversations and like talk through some of those things. And like, if it is emotionally triggering, like being like, okay, this is obviously a sticking point for me.
The whole dead mother thing is you can't seem to get over it.
Yeah. And
it's I think that's important as adults. You know, if you have kids, it's really important to not just say because I said so, or I have a bad feeling about
Yeah.
it, or my friend told me it was bad. Like, because kids, just as much as adults, need to be heard. They need to feel like their opinion matters and is valued. And it's maybe on a simpler level, but it goes a long way when you can have a conversation instead of cutting them off.
yeah. And I think like for students in the situation where like you feel like you're right and your parents are wrong, ultimately you're put in your parents' household for a reason. And so you have to respect their stuff. When you move out, go get your legs and
Watch those R-rated movies.
yeah, no, that's but
You live
yeah,
in
when
my
you're
house.
Under your,
It's
you-
my house. Follow my rules.
Read Harry Potter.
yeah. So whatever it may be, and so but using wisdom in that, because I think our parents are there to help guide us and stuff. And I
Yeah.
mean,
Sure.
we talked about our parents, like they were very strict on some of the things that we weren't allowed to watch and all that stuff, and even teen-rated games at times was like, no, I should be able to play this. Like, well, Adrian might watch, and like, boom,
Blood in it when my 5-year-old's watching a bloody hand
different
from
time.
Force Awakens.
It's a different time.
or from the library dropout.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
That's you.
So, all right,
That was a
Man,
good one.
That's all she wrote.
Yeah, we talked about the problem of evil and how temptation.
Suffering and temptation.
Yeah. So goodness, hey, leave us some comments wherever
think?
you're listening or watching. Let us know if you have questions for it. Like we want to answer stuff and all that and
Yep.
all that. And
Or
sometimes we'll have
any
fans write
media
in.
that you want us to take through the WorldView machine.
we used to have that.
I know.
Or we didn't do that
We
again.
take it through the WorldView machine. So we'll do it.
Man, that's something
Recommend something to us or ask us to watch it, and we'll do it.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Chris.
I'm Adrian.
And I'm Jimmy.
We'll see you next time.